people of Africa, of this part of Africa, are extraordinarily nice people to live with. They have a natural warmth and sense of values, which makes them good companions. And our relationship is very happy together.
It is a good way of life, and I think you'll find the local population here, in many ways, is beginning to live like we do anyway. They find, you know, the white man has some good ideas, some they like and some that they don't like, and the ones they like, they take on the same kind of habit.
An African calls the tune, and the white folk gallop off to stir memories among the ghosts of those early settlers who first farmed the great Rift Valley in Kenya. The Limuru hunt would disband after this last chase, but 14 years after independence, there is still room for the white man in this corner of Africa. Kenya occupies some 225,000 square miles of the east coast of Africa. British farmers first settled the fertile White Highlands at the turn of this century. Many Kenyan whites, like their counterparts in Rhodesia today, feared majority rule, yet many stayed to serve the new nation. Humphrey Slade opposed independence, but became Speaker of an African Parliament. Today there is no political role for the white man. Men like Slade work less conspicuously for charity. He recalls his own blind fury against majority rule.
My first reaction was one of great bitterness, almost scorched earth, you might say. If they're going to destroy what we've tried to build over these years, to hell with them. Not really the Africans, but to hell with those who are destroying it. But after 2 or 3 nights of very sleepless thought, I realized that it was my country and the Africans' country, that there was no resisting this. We've got to make the best of it.
Sir Michael Blundell led the European delegation to the 1962 Constitutional Conference in London, which paved the way to independence. When he returned to Nairobi, an angry settler flung 30 pieces of silver at his feet. Today, a Kenyan citizen and a successful businessman, Sir Michael lives in contented style, but not all whites could adapt.
A great many of our real right wing left. They went away. They simply couldn't take the change. My own thinking is that they were really unadjustable people anyway, who came away from the post-war England to here because they couldn't change to those conditions, and equally found it difficult to change here, so they left and they went to Rhodesia or South Africa. I think the most traumatic experience for people was not to be able to influence events, not to be able to go and present their case, because many Europeans hadn't met, didn't know the new African leaders who were coming forward, and felt that they might be prejudiced against them, that is, against the Europeans. I don't think this was so in practice, but this is how they felt. And there's no doubt about it, that adjustment period of the first 3 or 4 years after independence was for many Europeans a difficult period. They were highly critical, felt lost, had nobody to turn to, missed the position of the British administration and those sort of things.
Mike Hughes sits peacefully fishing on Kenya's Lake Naivasha. He came to Kenya from Market Harbour in 1952 and soon found himself in the thick of the fight. In those days he toted 2 6-guns and went in hunt of the Mau Mau, but that was all long ago.
I fought on the British side, on the colonial side, and that was again thing that President Kenyatta said when independence happened. He said, let's forget about what's gone in the past. And he said, we want this, you know, we're going to run a nice nation here. And I certainly have had nothing said against me whatsoever for any part I took in the Mau Mau emergency.
In fact, I mean, do you actually have relationships with guys who you used to go out hunting?
Very certainly. I work for at least 2 or 3 ex-African Mau Mau generals, and we get on very well together.
Paul Ngei is Kenya's Minister of Cooperative Development. Today his greatest preoccupation is the state of the coffee crop, but once he fought with a Mau Mau and was hunted by the white man. Yet he too is without hatred.
If you carry on the old scores, you lose a lot, because you develop such hatred that you will not be able to use your brains or intelligence well, because you're always full of hatred. I don't think that is the right approach. We should really forget the past. That is gone, and move on in developing Kenya for everyone.
Were you able to do this quite easily, because you had been imprisoned, you had been a fighter yourself, you'd been imprisoned by the British? Were you able to forget the past quickly?
Well, I had to emulate my president, otherwise I wouldn't be his minister.
"5,000 square miles of Kenya is lake water. At least half the remaining land is desert and spiky bush. The view from the top is magnificent, the ground beneath the feet harsh. When the first settlers arrived, they leased the best land from the Kikuyu. The Africans regarded the transaction as just that, a lease. The whites considered they had bought the land. The hunger for land was the spur to independence. 14 years on, the hunger has not been fully satisfied. There are still peasants cultivating meagre crops by the side of busy highways. Sometimes they do so on the edge of great estates owned by their political rulers. From the president down, government ministers have made sure that their land hunger has been well and truly sated. Nevertheless, great acres of mixed farmland, once in the hands of whites, have been transferred to African cooperatives. But the cry for land is not hushed by the passing traffic. Bruce Nightingale's 900-acre farm a few miles from Lake Nakuru. There were some 3,000 European-owned mixed farms in Kenya at the time of independence. Today, a bare 50 or so remain in white hands. But there has been no expropriation. White farmers were invited to sell out under a British-financed land transfer scheme. So far, some £42 million have been paid to farmers who took advantage of the scheme. If Bruce decided to sell, he would expect to receive about £40 an acre for his land, less than the market price, but he would get his money in foreign currency. There are still some £6 million in the kitty, but it is hoped to wind up the scheme by 1979. The Nightingale family, Jim and his sons, in all they farm 1,500 acres. They intend to stay put.
I think it's been our attitude all along that we do want to stay. It is home to us, which a lot of people don't understand. But I'm, fourth generation. It is home, and home has a tremendous pull. Whereas I can remember very clearly people of my parents' generation talking about home as being Britain. To us, home has always been Kenya, and that's been our attitude. So we've always made this decision. There's never been any temptation to sell. I feel that if we'd ever sold, it would have been because of excessive pressure.
What is the pressure like? After all, it's no secret that there is pressure.
Any pressures that are coming, I think, are from people in government who are doing their job. They have a British buyout scheme, and they've got to try and get the whole thing sorted out and finished before the deadline. So from their point of view, they've written to us and asked us when we will allow the valuers on so they can get on with the business.
We went down to the minister, a little upset. We had already written to him to say we didn't intend to sell the land, and we were asked to come and discuss it in person with him. We came away very much chastened in that we went to his office, and the tremendous number of people there just begging him to find them land. We had some people who were there saying, well, when we die, we are due our 6x2 bit of land, can't we have it now to sit on? He gave it to us that these people want somewhere to live. Would we be prepared to sell our land, or even a portion of our land, to help them out? But as we pointed out to him, we didn't feel that our selling off even a few acres here was going to make any difference to the problem.
Do you feel at all guilty about this? Do you feel that you're keeping land from the homeless? Or from
Absolutely
the landless,
not.
I should say?
No, I have no sense of guilt whatsoever.
No.
I think this is our home, and I think we're doing a very good job. And that's all there is to it, really.
We go out of our way to help all our neighbours. We remain on extremely good terms with them. We don't feel there is any pressure on us from our immediate neighbourhood.
Some Europeans grumble privately about the land transfer scheme. Rich farmland, they say, is broken up into tiny units, providing no more than subsistence crops for peasant families. No such accusation could be levelled at this rich collective. Perhaps that's why the ministry chose it for us to see. Nevertheless, it is an impressive success story. Coffee production is up. The meat and dairy yield is improved. The collective took over in 1966. Where one white family earned a good living, 187 African families share the proceeds. For that, even 3,000 acres of well-run farmland seems barely enough. What does the government reply to those whites who, like the Nightingales, hold on to their land, saying they can farm it better than the Africans? Paul and Gay.
Government policy has it that so long as you are using your farm progressively and well, then you are all right. But we are not. The government does not allow anybody sitting on a farm without doing anything.
There are pressures, though, aren't there, Minister?
Well, you see, there will really be pressures everywhere. I mean, pressures are there anywhere in the world. But pressures like this are ignored when the fact remains that somebody is useful to a country.
And so the policy remains it must be a willing sale to a willing purchaser.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Many white farmers who've sold out have stayed on in Kenya and turned their farming skills to profitable use. There is good money to be earned as a farming contractor, crop spraying and renting out farm equipment to the collectives and the new generation of gentlemen African farmers. The men who do this work believe Kenya will have use for their services for a long time ahead. Other white farmers have contrived to sell and stay on as farm managers. Others who grabbed their money and ran to Rhodesia or South Africa have returned to Kenya's more neighbourly climate. The visitor to this lakeside holiday lodge may gaze on 400 species of bird life and reflect that the whole place was built in the middle of nowhere on the proceeds of a farm. Jean Skinner and her son Stuart can still enjoy the country they love. Jean compensates for the loss of the farm by charging guests up to £45 a night. The view is worth it.
We started building the lodge 10 years ago. After having sold all our farms, we were obliged to sell them, coffee farms and the ranch. And as we had 6 children, Stuart being the second, we had to do something. And tourism was about the only thing acceptable to the Kenya government, which we, as Europeans, were allowed to do.
What do you mean you were obliged to sell?
Well, some ministers wanted the land, and when they want land, really it's sensible to let them have it.
I see. Why did you feel it's so important then to stay in Kenya?
I was born here. My father was given a soldier settlement farm after the First World War and put his life into it, and Stuart's father, who died in the emergency. So we feel part of Kenya and we wanted to stay and make a go of it.
Do you feel bitter at all that you did have to give up your farm?
No, not at all. We've had a very good life on it. We made money, we enjoyed it, and now we're doing something else which we enjoy.
What the chairman has said, of course, about our early days in East Africa.
A Farewell to Africa After 24 Years by Walter McFarlane, a postboy from Lanarkshire who rose to assistant to the Kenyan Postmaster General. Kenyanization, which in effect means Africanization, slowly erodes the community of white experts who have made Kenya their home since independence. Walter was captain of the Royal Nairobi Golf Club. He is sandwiched by names that reflect Kenya's social change. Those who listen to Walter may reflect that the good life may not last forever, for the African trade unions would like Africanization speeded up in some fields.
As nice as Kenya.
But Charles Njonjo, Kenya's Attorney General, is convinced that Kenya will need the white man's expertise for a long time ahead.
Well, I say that there are certain fields where we have not got our own people who have got the qualifications and the know-how that we require. If I take my own profession, particularly the judiciary, we still need judges, and I'm recruiting judges from UK to this day. So I don't feel that we can hurry this process. As we get our own people qualified and they've got the qualification and experience, then of course we will slide down and slow down the number of expatriates that we have. But for the moment, I think we all agree, trade unions included, that we still require these people.
Nairobi, clean streets, smiling people, elegant parks, finance houses, and the smell of money to be earned by those with skills. When independence came, Kenya's white population numbered some 65,000. Many packed their bags and headed for lands where the black man kept, or was kept, in his place. Today, thanks to the influx of experts from all over Europe, the white population is back to near the pre-independence level. They live in a booming capitalist economy. The soaring world market price of coffee has released Kenyan money for investment. Kenyatta's stable rule attracts foreign investors and foreign companies. Those who kept their nerve did well, the Managing Director of Car in General, Brian O'Toole.
Now, at the time of independence, did you have great fears for the future?
To be truthful, yes, I think all Europeans did. We'd seen what had happened in the Congo. We had the Congolese refugees through here, and we had some fears. We'd been through Mau Mau, of course, but I decided that this is my home. Born here, I like the country, and I've always got on very well with people, so I stayed.
Was it tough at the beginning for businessmen after independence?
No, right from the word go, the Kenya government has been extremely good, reasonable, and I'd say helpful, generally.
But some of the business community did get out, didn't they?
Yes, a lot of them panicked. A lot of them got scared, a lot of them sold out. Enabled people like Lonro to buy up companies very cheap and make a lot of money. But I decided to stay on, and I'm not sorry I did so.
In fact, you've done very well, haven't you?
Yes, I think so.
The white population send their children to private schools, where they are likely to meet only Asians and the children of the most well-off Africans. Later, the white youngsters finish their education in England. It is the beginning of the break with Africa. Because his parents' farm has gone, Stuart believes that he must seek a living outside of Kenya.
I realized about 8 or 9 years ago that I could never work here. So I've always planned to make my life abroad, but to use Kenya as my base and come back as often as possible.
What are your feelings about that? I mean,
I think life is made up tremendously on sort of memories and things, and one's childhood here was so fabulous, and it's still tremendous to have a base here and a sort of family home here. I'm very sad that I can't sort of farm here, but one learned to accept that quite a long time ago, really.
If your son decides he wants to have a future in this country, do you believe there will be a future for him here?
This is such an open question. I honestly couldn't answer it. We're prepared to play the years as they come along. We have no idea what the future governments and future country has for us. We have great faith in the stability of the past of this country, and we would like to see it continue. And if it does, as it has done over many years in the past, well, then I can only say my sons are lucky.
At the moment, it's a wonderful country for children to be in. It may not be a good place for children in 10 years' time. Okay, well then, everybody will have to think again.
But I would say that once a foundation of a house had been strongly laid, there will be no cracks.
And that there is a role for the European in this country for some years ahead.
Yes.
Kenyatta will obviously go one day, and everybody wants to know what will happen. Well, I'm quite sure that we shall have a short period of confusion. The Constitution provides for that, and then I consider a stable regime under one of the younger men will come forward. We shall have changes. They will be slightly towards the left, which I think will be necessary and sensible, and we shall continue very much as we are now, a capitalist-oriented country with a strong socialist background.
Everyone I talk to when they're on camera says the most marvellous things about this country. However, in private, one hears quite strong criticisms and quite strong fears for the future. Why does nobody say that to me on camera? Are they afraid of something?
I don't think so. Of course, you're not supposed to criticize various things here. I think, really, truthfully, people who are living here and are not citizens do feel that they should walk carefully, because they feel that they are living in the country in a way as guests. Whereas I am a citizen and it's become my country. It really has psychologically become my country, and I don't mind about criticism at all. We have got corruption. We have had a reduction in the standards of the administration. Our civil service, in my view, is much too concerned with its private businesses. Take poaching. Our wildlife has been decimated in the north, and all these shops selling trophies, they all ought to be closed down. But I'm told that people who are fairly high up in the political world have got an interest in all these shops. Well, these things are very irritating and are wrong. But there again, look at your own country. There are lots of things wrong in that too.
It is still a very good life for the white man. The country clubs, although of course open to all with the money to buy a pink gin, still provide an insulation from the harsher realities of African life. The sport is good. There are still servants to wait at the table. For the Kenyan white, the wicket is easy-paced. Sir Michael Blundell acknowledges that life is good, but meets the challenge by saying he has earned what he enjoys.
When I first came here, I'd like to describe to you what it was like. I had a hexagonal hut made of mud. The roof was grass, through which, if it was a heavy storm, the rain came. I had no furniture. It was made of petrol boxes. The floor was rammed murram, out of which jiggers jumped onto one's feet.
What's a jigger?
A jigger's a horrible little sort of flea-like thing that gets into the end of your toe and burrows away and gradually eats it all up. And then my bed was just a wooden frame with rawhide strips down on it. And we hadn't a lot of food like we have today. There was no agricultural industry. So when people come along and tell me I have a very good life, my comment is I've largely made it. I haven't inherited it through a welfare state anyway, that's one thing.
You're right.
The whites of Rhodesia have also enjoyed the good life and fear for its destruction. Just as Kenyan women did in the past, so have Rhodesian housewives learned to shoot to kill, that they may postpone the dark day of majority rule. Laying aside the white man's burden has not proved easy anywhere. It would be foolish to attempt too many comparisons between the Kenya of 14 years ago and the Rhodesia of today. But are there lessons for the Rhodesians in Kenya's experience?
I would say that the great lesson the Rhodesians ought to learn is that they've got to have African majority rule. They've got to, and the sooner they get it, the less communism, the less Marxism they'll have. And that being so, the best thing they could do is to arrange for somebody to come forward on a one-man, one-vote as the leader, and then hand over power to him and back him up to the full, training the Africans, helping them, and not worrying too much about being in the political field.
But the fact remains that the Rhodesians have a very different population from the population that was in Kenya at the time of independence. They have a lower white middle class, they have even white proletariat, which you didn't have. Won't many of those people have to go elsewhere?
Yes, I think this very strongly. I think that African majority rule immediately means a greater determination by the African to share in the economic life of the country. And that will mean that many of the Rhodesians in the less highly executive jobs will have to go or accept a much lower standard of living, which they won't do. So they will have to go.
But handled properly, you still believe there can be a role for the white man in that part of Africa as well as here?
I'm quite sure. I'm quite sure, and I'd just like to add one other thing. I'm equally sure, provided they took these steps quickly, they needn't fear communism. After all, Kenyatta was termed a communist, you know, and that's the last thing we've got here.
I think the lesson that the Africans in Rhodesia could learn and should learn from our own experience in Kenya is that there are Europeans, I believe, in Rhodesia who are genuinely interested in the country and will identify them with whatever comes after all this trouble that they are going through. Trust these people, use them, and make use of their experience. We have found that very, very useful in our own country.
I wouldn't preach to them except to say it's not nearly so bad as you think it might be when the day comes, the inevitable day of majority rule. I can tell them that.
John.